Welcome to Zeiss Full Exposure, the video podcast that goes behind the scenes with some of the industry's most innovative visual storytellers. Now here's your host, photographer and filmmaker, Jim Camp.
Each year in October, thousands of pro photographers and enthusiasts descend on the Javits Convention Center in Midtown Manhattan to fork over $15 for a cold turkey sandwich, listen to experts in the field, and fondle the latest gear at the largest photo equipment exhibit in the U.S. The 2019 Photo Plus Expo was no exception. We sat down to chat with just a few of these photographers at the most recent expo. On our final episode from New York, we were joined by fashion photographer, portraitist, designer, and concert musician Aleksandr Karjaka. He extols the similarity of photography and music by describing how he captures the essence of a subject by listening with his eyes and watching and interacting with the subject, not the camera. When he's not behind a camera, you might see him behind a clarinet at Carnegie Hall or the Metropolitan Opera House, fashion designing or teaching fashion photography at Parsons School of Design, the New School in New York.
Alex,
Jim,
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Got to talk really
Right
close
into
in
this
there.
guy.
For anybody that's listening,
Yep.
you're a really interesting photographer in the sense that you're a very successful commercial photographer.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
You're also a professional classical musician
Correct. Yes.
and a teacher as well.
Yeah. Parsons.
Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got there, how you're able to conduct all those things. I mean, when I say professional musician, you play at the Met, you play at the Carnegie Hall. How do you balance all that? Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for having me here, and thanks to Zeiss. I am I'm Alex Karjaka, and I am I'm an artist across the board. So I've been a clarinetist, classically trained clarinetist for coming up on 25 years, if you can believe that. And I'm a professional commercial photographer that's worked with groups like Amazon, Unilever, Degree, Body Spray, worked with Carnegie Hall, like international musicians, just across the board. My training with photography started off with just going to the park and observing life, people and whatnot, like looking, counting squirrels and whatnot, in a similar way to clarinet. And so what happened was when I started playing clarinet at 10, and that's kind of a full committal kind of career. So by the time you start deciding, do I want to go into music for the rest of my life, you're about 16 or 17. But I could have gone into photography, I could have been pre-med, but I couldn't live without music. So what happened was I did a music ed degree and at Michigan State, but I was still doing photography at Michigan State. Like I was doing a lot of street photography, portraiture with a lot of the students out there. I pursued my first master's at Bowling Green State in Ohio, and I picked up my first DSLR Canon Rebel, but I'd been shooting Nikon for years. I'd shoot like the Hasselblad 503C, and with those beautiful Zeiss lenses on them, and I had my hands in a lot of different pots. And so the idea was I couldn't really stop being a photographer, even though I was spent 8 years in clarinet. So what happened was in the summer of 2009 or 10, I started doing more work out here. And after my first semester at Manhattan School and a second master's, it was okay, I can really spend time with my photography, developing that. So I sold my Honda. I bought a bunch of Nikon 2.8 gear and Nikon D700, and I started shooting. I mean, of all things, I started shooting weddings really quickly. But meanwhile, I'm still subbing at Carnegie Hall. I'm still touring the world with opera companies, performing in chamber ensembles, subbing at the Metropolitan Opera a bit, and also doing clarinet master classes along with doing photo master classes and teaching. So there's a duality between the two. The big thing is that it's a daily balance of practice, whether you're practicing clarinet, whether you're practicing photography, you're looking at your images, you're listening to the recordings of your practice sessions, or you're in rehearsals, or you're working with different clients. There are a lot of similarities between music and photography in a way that kind of gets overlooked. And so it really turns into like, I'm a photographer that listens with my eyes. Like, I'm able to take that 20 some years of training and turn that into a unique perspective in photography in a way that has people light up, that has like them reach vulnerability in a different way, as opposed to just technically proficient and perfect.
Talk a little bit about your some of your favorite projects as far as portraiture.
Anybody can take a beautiful photograph. Like, I'm more interested in capturing the soul of somebody. Like, so we're walking around, like you're walking around this fabulous expo, and we're like, you've got all these different personalities that go beyond what we're wearing, who we're posturing. Like, I'm more interested as a photographer, as a portrait artist, capturing that deeper side, the energy. But that takes more than 4 minutes. That's more than, I'm gonna put my high key, I'm gonna get a little fill here, I'm gonna get a camera right there, and I'm gonna pose, bam, 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 chin down, and like extend down, like all that technique, that's all great. But for me as a portrait artist, that's important, don't get me wrong, but that's just a small perspective. For me, like working with these different projects, like you'll notice that it's the last like 5 minutes of any portrait shoot. Zach here, for example, we were working together, like different outfits, we had like different music going on in the background, but at the end it's just like, all right, let's just have some fun. You've been there 90 minutes like in front of the camera, you're kind of exhausted, you're just like, leave all inhibition to the wind, like let's try something. And that's usually the best stuff that comes out. It's just that like, we got it in the can. Do we still say that? I still shoot film. And then magic happens. Like for me, so if you're coming into my photo studio, right? You spend like, if you're a gal or a guy, you're gonna spend time in hair and makeup. And usually that's about like an hour to 90 minutes. And in that time, I'm usually playing, like, this will sound crazy, but I play a lot of tango music. You can't listen to that music and not feel moved by it, or like, either if you love it or you hate it. But to be honest, I've been doing this in New York almost a decade. Nobody hates tango music. It's just that kind of like, all right. And then I've got Lavazza coffee, like wafting in the background, and you got my whole team there, like, pampering you. So you got little tango music, or like your shoulders start moving, you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be good. I mean, portraiture especially, though, it's important that like you gain trust, and so that you can try something that's out of the box, that's different. And so after 90 minutes of being like getting a massage, like from hair and makeup and coffee, and you're like, you got a little bit of a buzz and little bagel or fruit in you, then you come in front of the camera and it's like we're old friends, like we're doing this right now. And suddenly it's just like, all right, we like, in order to get to vulnerability, in order to get to a place where we can try something, then it's like, oh, like when you're with the barista here in the Chemex pour over, my friend here is a little bit more uptight, so I'm gonna play something that's gonna be like with him, like, because he's very focused. He's got a procedure. He's got to get to that bloom. He's got a variety of things. So like listening to what he's into.
So if you have a difficult subject that's maybe a little harder to warm up, are you talking about like using props or using something to bring in?
Some people
to sort of distract them.
Well, some people, like for this gentleman here, he had his kit, his crew, so he's like, he feels at home with the coffee. Some people like will bring in like a prop that they hold, like musicians, for example. Like I photograph a ton of private clients who are musicians. They feel it like they've been with their violin for 20, 30 years. Like, it doesn't matter where they are, this is home when they're holding that, or they're just doodling on there and like just playing like blowing a few notes. So in that instance, that's great. But for a client that's just like, I've come here to take a photograph, what do I do with my arms? Do I put like right here? It's like, we've never been in front of a camera before. It can be a little rough. I love the challenge of disarming somebody so that we can see the big picture of who they are, rather than being like, because photographers are notorious for having fourth wall, right? Like, there's the client, and there's the art director, and there's the product, and then here I am, the artist. Like, rather than just being like, hey, what'd you have for breakfast today? And you're like, 2 eggs with, I don't know, like I had some cereal on the side. How can you do eggs and cereal on the side? Well, like, and then suddenly, like, they're looking at the camera, photo, and then you get to try different things. And the first outfit's really good, don't get me wrong, but by the time you get in the second or third outfit, or with the product or whatever scene, it's even better. But I'm amazed at watching other photographers or like new photographers not engage they're looking at the back of their camera, they're doing all this, but they're still talking with their client, but they're not engaging them, which is bananas to me, because at the end of the day, the photography is really good, but it's this.
Well, talk a little about we talked about that earlier, about the relationship, because you're discussing that now, but how key that is to a portrait. Like you said, if everything's lit and everything's set, you can make a properly exposed image or whatever, but you're not necessarily relating to the person you're photographing.
Exactly.
So talk a little bit about that,
you have to be there with them. Like, there's a sense of like I'm standing like physically I'm standing right in front of you, but am I listening to you? Am I like hearing your concerns? And there's a lot with like what's being said, but more importantly, as photographers, what's not being said. You have to be in the environment with your client. You have to be there if that's coming across. Then it just so happens that the camera is capturing that moment in between moments, right, that we're always talking about. It's like sometimes I don't even look at the camera. I'm just depressing the shutter just so that I can have this eye contact with you, because it's building that relationship. But at the end of the day, it's about us. It's about the relationship. Not only is that important for you as a photographer, but that's also going to build your business, whether you're taking photographs as a hobby, if you're looking to expand. It's just like, because that experience, your client, regardless if it's the model, the art director, the team, they're going to go out and like not push your name, but they're going to tell you how wonderful you were. They're going to give you all that acclaim on social media, which is better than any promotional campaign out there. For example, like Aaron doesn't like having his photograph taken, but he's this international composer, like award-winning, like he's a brilliant guy. But we did a photo shoot right before this with him in a tuxedo. But then he was like, I brought ink. What do we do with the ink? I said, how dirty do you want to go? Like, how do you want to make, like, how much fun do you want to have? So he dipped his fingers in the ink and he started composing on set. And for me, this is heaven. Because this is like, you're doing your craft, what you spent your whole life on, but you're allowing me to create a story. But I want to see like how this like came about, like, and he's actually thinking, he's actually there, and I get to capture that, as opposed to just do whatever you want. Like, this is it's a partnership. So you get to, like, this is like the last 5 minutes of the photo shoot, because once you get ink on your hands, I don't know, but you're done. Like, it's game over. You get one shot at this. I love stories. Like, exactly, the first sip, like half of us can't start our day without that coffee, right? Capturing that in a small little vignette, little story. Like, I love creating these little stills.
What do you want your students to take away from your class, when you're teaching?
Ooh, that's like asking what your favorite like sip of air is. Like, for my students, the stuff that they're learning at a rapid rate, but to explore the history, explore different parts of New York, explore different techniques. My big takeaway for my students is to explore, like, be hungry. If this is your passion, or if this is your job, or who you are, like, that's all, like, that years of training, it's going to come together in those photographs. So when the moment is that critical moment, right, that decisive moment is there, it's like, it's inherent, it's intuitive. Spend time studying, like, go and look further, go back to Renaissance. Like, you have so much opportunity to study photography that's not directly photography like related as well. Like, absorbing your surroundings, all that knowledge, lighting, mood, energy, that the street vendors, the cup of coffee that you're about to get, the flower guy, whatever, that comes into your photograph, but we take it, I think, personally, at least I try to bring that out with my students, not to take that for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to shoot a lot. If you're going to write a lot.
Write a lot.
But you're also going to need to read a lot.
You got to read.
You need to see.
Yep.
That's a really good way to end it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really important. Thanks a lot, Alex.
Jim, thank you.
The Zeiss Bodice, exclusive to Sony's full-frame mirrorless camera system. It captures sharp images in corner-to-corner clarity, giving depth of field and focus distance via an OLED display. That's inspiration made by Zeiss. Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time for another edition of Full Exposure. To listen to an extended version of this interview, go to ZeissFullExposure.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Zeiss_Full Exposure. And to learn more about the latest equipment from Zeiss, head over to Zeiss.com. This has been a production of Sugared Studios.